Power, live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Tyler Kendall, I'm Joe Matthew. Tonight, on the cusp of reopening the government. The steps ahead as the House prepares to reconvene tomorrow for the first time in over 50 days in order to pass the Senate's budget compromise bill. We'll be joined ahead by Republican Congresswoman and member of the House Rules Committee, Erin Houchin, and Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss up ahead.
Plus, our exclusive report tonight, peeling back the curtain on communications between the White House and airline CEOs in the days leading up to massive flight cuts. People familiar are telling Bloomberg airline executives privately asked for more information on the safety data that mandated the cancellations. What else we're learning just ahead.
And the market impact felt today on the news. SoftBank sold its entire stake in Nvidia to help bankroll its AI investments. How the tech sector fared and more when we go to Romaine Bostick for tonight's Power Moves.
But we begin tonight with news coming out of Washington. The House of Representatives preparing to reconvene and vote on the Senate's compromise budget package to reopen the government following a late-night vote that resulted in this.
On this vote, the yeas are 60 and the nays are 40. 3/5 of the Senate duly chosen and sworn, having voted in the affirmative. The motion upon reconsideration is agreed to.
That 60-40 vote coming only after 7 Democrats and Independent Senator Angus King bucked their party to bring the government shutdown a step closer to an end. The appropriations bill would extend current levels, as we told you, of government funding until January 30th, and it includes funding for both the House and Senate, increased funds for lawmakers' security, among other measures. Senate Republicans agreed to hold a vote on affordable health care tax credits once the government is reopened.
Let's get to Bloomberg's Erik Wasson for details on what we can expect when the House returns. Erik, just walk us through what's going to happen here next. We know lawmakers are already back on Capitol Hill.
Well, the first step is the Rules Committee. It'll convene tonight, and usually those meetings go on for quite a while. But this is mostly perfunctory. We'll see the Rules Committee report out a rule allowing for some debate, and we're expecting a vote sometime in the evening on Wednesday. They said the House will convene on 4 p.m. This is giving members time to come back. There are flight delays to contend with due to the shutdown, ironically. We know that one member, Derek Van Orden from Wisconsin, is driving his motorcycle, apparently, from Wisconsin. So, they need some time to get back. And it'll be a tight margin for House Speaker Mike Johnson. He only has a 2-vote margin. Democrats are lining up against it. The Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, has said he will vote against it. He's whipping his members to vote against it because it does not contain an actual extension of the ACA premium tax credits. But there are some Democratic members. I'm looking at Henry Cuellar, Jared Golden, and others who are likely to cross party lines and vote for this. And so I'm expecting the government to be reopened by Thursday morning.
Really interesting. It was 29 degrees this morning in Milwaukee, by the way, and 28 here in Washington. So that sounds like a pretty chilly motorcycle ride. Erik, I'm just curious about this promised vote on Obamacare subsidies, a promise by John Thune in the Senate. There is no such promise in the House, is there?
In fact, Mike Johnson's been asked several times, the Speaker of the House, he said he will not guarantee that, noting that health care is a complex issue. We had a story out on the terminal with my colleague Caitlin Riley yesterday. It's going to be a very uphill battle to try to get an agreement on this. Republicans are talking about ideas such as abortion restrictions inside Obamacare plans, expanded health savings accounts, but they don't typically tend to help the lower income people instead of premium subsidies. So, with those tough asks being pushed by conservatives, it's going to be very difficult to come up with a deal. And even if something passes the Senate, the House is probably unlikely to come to a deal this year. My sense is that millions of people are going to see increased healthcare costs, and insurance companies are going to see a hit to their bottom line.
All right, we'll see you up on the Hill tomorrow, Erik. Bloomberg's Erik Wasson with the state of play here in Washington. And as the House prepares to vote as soon as tomorrow afternoon, the ball is with the Rules Committee, aforementioned, set to meet within the next hour or so to kickstart this process formally. One person will be in the room is Republican Congresswoman Erin Houchin of Indiana. A member of the Rules Committee joins us live from Capitol Hill. She also is a member of both the House Budget and Commerce Committees. So she's knee-deep in this story. Congresswoman, it's great to see you, and thanks for being with us here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Let's start with the very simple stuff. As Erik just mentioned, it's not that easy getting an airplane on time into Washington, D.C. from some corners of the country. Will you have a quorum on the committee this evening?
Yes, I expect we'll have a quorum on the committee. We are tracking everybody's flights, and I think all of us are scheduled to be back in time for the 6:30 clock in. So I do expect we'll be here. I didn't have any flight delays. I know that's been an issue for some. My prayers are out for Derek Van Orden traveling across the country in the cold, but he's a Navy SEAL, so I have no doubt he'll be just fine.
Understood. Sometimes these committee hearings can get kind of chippy. I'm wondering if there's going to be a full-throated debate over policy in the Rules Committee, or if this, as Erik mentioned, is kind of a perfunctory move. Just set the rules and let's get on with it.
Well, there's always robust debate in the Rules Committee. We tend to, I guess go back and forth pretty vigorously on our policy positions. But one thing I want to make clear is the reason the Democrats shut down the government for 50 days is because they're fighting for these Obamacare premium subsidies. This is a subsidy on top of a subsidy to try to prop up a failing program, Obamacare. And these premium credits don't go to families. They don't go to hardworking families. They go to big insurance. So this is a huge loss for the Democrats, and I'm grateful to the moderate Democrats in the Senate for opening the government and stopping the pain they've inflicted on our veterans and our federal workers and SNAP recipients. Enough is enough. It was a failed experiment. I'm glad that we're going to reopen the government. House Republicans are taking the lead on that now, and we will have it open this week.
So, Congresswoman, let's stick on these Affordable Care Act premium subsidies. What is the solution down the road? Because President Trump himself has said that he's open to negotiating when it comes to health care. What's the tangible policy solution that you would support? We've heard floated that there could be a year extension with some structural changes, and we've also heard floated some completely new plans altogether.
Well, there have to be structural changes. We have some recipients who have never made a claim, and yet they are receiving, and the big insurance companies are receiving a premium for these people. So there may have to be some cost sharing, but we did have some cost sharing provisions and reductions in cost sharing in the One Big Beautiful Bill and the Working Families Tax Cut Act that House Republicans passed to the Senate. It would have resulted in a 12.7% decrease in premium costs for the American people, and Democrats in the Senate fought to have that removed. So let's understand this. We had a provision that would actually result in affordability for the American people. Democrats fought to take it out in order to stand on this line, which is benefiting only big insurance. It's a debate that's worth having. We need to make health care affordable again in the United States, and under Republican leadership, I have no doubt we will.
The President talked about this last evening when he sat down with Laura Ingraham on Fox News and even floated this idea of Trumpcare, trying to describe how this would work. Congressman, let's have our viewers and listeners listen and get your reaction.
What I want, and probably what you're alluding to, is the fact that I want, instead of going to the insurance companies, I want the money to go into an account for people where the people buy their own health insurance. It's so good. The insurance will be better. It'll cost less. Everybody's going to be happy. They're going to feel like entrepreneurs. They're actually able to go out and negotiate their own health insurance. And they can use it only for that reason. That's the beauty, only for that purpose. And if we did that, that would be so exciting. Call it Trumpcare, call it whatever you want to call it.
So first we had Romney Care, then Obamacare. Maybe we'll have Trumpcare, Congresswoman. I'm just wondering how exactly that would work. The president, clearly in an entrepreneurial spirit, again said that people could go out and negotiate their own health insurance and use it only for that reason. Does that mean each of us pick up the phone and call UNH to figure out what our rates are going to be?
Well, I can't speak precisely for the president's plan because I haven't seen it, but what I can say is that every time we have inflicted a middleman in this situation, which is precisely what Obamacare did, we have the pharmacy benefit managers and insurance companies that are making record profits at the same time that healthcare costs are going up. So Obamacare was not a health care reform program. It was a health insurance benefit program, and it has failed. So if it is giving these resources directly to the American people and cutting out the middleman, I think that has to be a step toward affordability, because all we're doing now is benefiting people in the middle, and we're taking this relationship between a doctor and a patient and we're inserting a lot of people in between this, and that's resulting in increased costs. So we need more transparency, we need lower costs, we need PBM reform. These are all conversations we're going to have, but health savings accounts are going to be part of that conversation, and I think that it's worth having, again, to make healthcare in America affordable again.
So this is a conversation about affordability, Congresswoman, and we had a new Harris poll conducted for Bloomberg News, which found that half of respondents in the October survey said the economy isn't working for them. That's up 41% in February. On the heels of last Tuesday's election wins for Democrats, is this a messaging problem for the GOP or a policy problem for the GOP, or do you not see it as a problem at this point in time?
Well, much of the provisions in the Working Families Tax Cuts Act have not taken effect. I think we will see the economy bounce back after the first of the year when most of these provisions get moving. But again, yes, we need to be focused on affordability nationwide. We need to be focused on housing and healthcare affordability. I think that's clear. I think that is a message that we can all take home. It's certainly something that we hear when we're back in the district, particularly for young adults. So we will be working on those issues. We have to have the government open to do that. It makes no sense to have us all held hostage for this big insurance giveaway that the Democrats have been fighting for 50 days. Let's get back to the work of the American people so we can actually get to the problem at hand, solving this affordability issue.
You know, while we're talking affordability, Congresswoman, just to end on this, are your constituents expecting a $2,000 tariff dividend check from the president, or is that something that Congress would have to legislate?
Well, my constituents aren't asking for tariff revenue. They are not asking for that. Honestly, when I'm home, they support President Trump and they support what he's trying to do to put the American worker first. We have seen this over and over again. By closing the border, we're increasing wages. It will take time to undo the damage done by 4 years of the Biden administration. It's not going to be overnight. We are slowly working through provisions and policies to, again, make America affordable again and safe again and secure again. And all of those things are happening under President Trump's leadership and House Republicans and Senate Republicans alongside him.
All right, Republican Congresswoman Erin Houchin of Indiana, thanks so much for joining us here on Bloomberg. And meanwhile, optimism over ending the longest government shutdown in U.S. history helped drive a rebound in stocks despite renewed concerns about AI spending after a revenue cut from CoreWeave. The S&P 500 managed to erase early losses, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed at a record high. For more, let's turn now to Power Moves with Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick, who joins us live from New York. Hey, Romaine.
Yeah, you don't actually see that type of chart that we just had on the screen, Tyler, very often, where the Dow actually outperforms the NASDAQ and the S&P, but that's exactly what transpired today. The Dow did hit a record high, led largely by healthcare names and a bit of a boost from Apple as well. But when you go to the tech space, at least for the names that aren't Apple, it was a much different story. It had a lot to do with a lot of concerns around the AI spend. First, it was the news that SoftBank was actually closing out the position that it had in Nvidia's shares, about $6 billion worth of shares, saying it's going to take that money and deploy it elsewhere. And then CoreWeave, which reported earnings last night, cutting its forecast and providing maybe a little bit of agita with regards to just how far this AI spend goes. Remember, CoreWeave is one of these neo clouds. They buy Nvidia chips, create their GPU systems, and then lease that out to other companies. That's not holding up in the trade, and that was a big part of the reason why you saw softness in that space. As far as some of the other sectors, keep an eye on what's been going on with the airlines. They were under pressure once again today. Obviously, the government shutdown really creating a lot of concerns about, well, how viable some of these airlines are going to be in terms of earnings and profitability going forward, particularly if a lot of people start to scale back their holiday travel plans. Now, maybe a reopening of the government actually will blunt that impact, but as you and Joe are certainly going to be talking about today, Tyler, even if the government shutdown ends tomorrow, it's still going to take some days, maybe even potentially weeks, before we get back to any sort of sense of normalcy.
No doubt. They'll keep clamping down on capacity straight through the week, Romaine. It's great to have you, as always. Romaine Bostick from New York. Coming up, the House planning to vote on the Senate's bill that could end the government shutdown tomorrow. We'll discuss this with Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts as we cross the aisle up ahead. First, the record-long shutdown, though, may result in some economic data never being recorded, making it difficult to assess the economy's health. We'll dive into those implications with Bharat Ramamurti, former deputy director of the National Economic Council in the Biden administration, next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
President Trump often is able to persuade his followers of his reality, even if that reality isn't backed up by the facts. But I feel very firmly that that particular superpower of this president, who really is an effective communicator to his followers, simply doesn't work when it comes to affordability. We certainly saw that result at the polls with the affordability election a week ago today, and I'm sure that the kinds of comments he was making last night are going to do him more harm than good when it comes to that very issue.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Tyler Kendall. I'm Joe Matthew. That was Jared Bernstein from our conversation earlier today, chaired the White House Council of Economic Advisors in the Biden administration, talking there about President Trump's messaging when it comes to affordability, which plays right into a conversation this week on Bloomberg's Big Take podcast. Economist Peter Atwater was part of the show. He popularized the idea of a K-shaped economy during the pandemic. And Bloomberg's Catarina Saraiva also featured in the podcast and joins us now from our Houston bureau. Catarina, it's great to see you. Is it possible for the president to sell a K-shaped economy to Americans?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult right now because I think people realize what's going on, right? They see it on a daily basis when they buy their groceries. They feel it when they get their paycheck, or, you know, in the case of some folks during the shutdown, don't get a paycheck. So I think that is a harder thing to convince people of. And right now, as you mentioned, we are seeing a bit of a bifurcation in the economy where we're seeing things get tougher for folks at the lower incomes, and that kind of struggle creeping into the middle class as well.
Catarina, what's the level of concern among economists when it comes to a K-shaped economy, and how are corporations watching this? I'm curious how consumer spending patterns are influencing decisions on the corporate level.
Yeah, it's really seemed like this was a widespread concern for corporations during this earnings season. You heard a number of companies talk about this phenomenon where they're really seeing pain and pullback in spending among their lower income consumers, and really they're seeing, in some cases, their businesses being propped up by those at the top. And that's what you're seeing in aggregate data as well when you look at the economy overall. Consumers at the high end are really driving consumption right now. They're driving the spending, and that's just a reflection of, you know, those with wealth and with assets really still able to spend as the stock market goes up, and as they still have jobs, and those on the lower end kind of losing that ability to spend because they're just not seeing the wage increases they were before. They're still dealing with inflation as well.
All right, Bloomberg's Catarina Saraiva reporting live from our Houston bureau. Thank you so much. Joining us now to discuss further in our Washington bureau for a deeper dive into the state of the economy is Bharat Ramamurti, former deputy director of the National Economic Council under the Biden administration and author of The Bully Pulpit on Substack. Thanks so much for joining us here today. And I wanted to start with some of the data that we got today from ADP showing that U.S. companies shed 1,100 jobs in October. We've been looking at these other metrics to try to glean a picture of the labor market. What did you take from this data point as we are trying to put together that picture amid a government shutdown with a lack of data?
Yeah, if you look at it empirically, the ADP data doesn't have a ton of correlation to the official government jobs report, so I wouldn't read a ton into that. But I think it is broadly consistent with some of the other more official data sources that we have been seeing. And I think that it indicates over the last couple of months a real pullback in the labor market that when you combine it with accelerating inflation, which has gone from 2.3% headline over the summer to now 3% last month, it's a very tough picture for the economy and a very tough situation for the Fed.
If hindsight is 20/20, what does that mean when we're not going to be able to look back and have a clear grasp of jobs for the better part of a month, maybe more? We'll never fill in those gaps, will we?
Yeah, it's concerning that we don't have that data. It's one of the unfortunate consequences of the shutdown that we've had. Luckily, we'll be back on track, it looks like, starting next month, and we'll get a better picture of where things stand. It's also complicating the Fed's life. You know, they have to take the highest quality data into consideration as they try to project out where the labor market's going to be and where inflation's going to be.
So what's the Fed supposed to do in December? Hold a seance, or will they have new data to work with?
Look, I thought it was pretty interesting that Chair Powell threw some water on the idea of a cut in December in his comments after the last FOMC meeting. I think that they really want to be data dependent, and then there's no data for them to depend upon other than the inflation data. So I think that they're going to be in a tough position. You're starting to see some conflict within the committee. You saw it already in the last set of votes. You see it in some of the public remarks over the last few weeks. I think it's going to be a very close decision, and I think some of the assumption that there's automatically going to be a cut in December, I think it's a little bit far-fetched.
Wow.
Well, of course, the backdrop to a tough decision for the FOMC are the tariffs and tariff policy. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this idea floated by President Trump that we could see $2,000 tariff rebate checks. What sort of impact would that have on the economy? And is this feasible right now when we're looking at the numbers being brought in and how tariff revenue is already being distributed?
Yeah, look, I think that the odds of something like that happening are under 1%. I think it's highly, highly unlikely. It's another one of these Trump ideas that he floats, like the 50-year mortgage that slowly fades off into the ether as it gets exposed to reality. Remember, that tariff revenue was already supposed to be dedicated to partially offsetting the cost of their massive tax cut earlier this year. It was supposed to absorb about $1 trillion out of the $4 trillion headline cost of that. And then on top of that, the Supreme Court, if you listen to the oral argument, was very, very skeptical of Trump's tariffs. And if I were a betting man, I would be betting on the idea that those tariffs are going to be struck down, which would then be followed by a refund. So a lot of that tariff revenue is going to go out the door, not to Americans in $2,000 checks, but back to the companies that paid it.
Let's get into the 50-year mortgage. You brought it up, so I have to. This is what the president said about this concept last evening on Fox News. Listen.
It's not even a big deal. I mean, you know, you go from 40 to 50 years, and what it means is you pay something less from 30. That some people had a 40, and then now they have a 50. All it means is you pay less per month. You pay it over a longer period of time.
I don't know too many people with a 40-year mortgage. Maybe you do. But what would this mean for affordability and effectively nailing people in place?
Yeah, look, if you look at the numbers for a typical mortgage, the average home price in this country is about $400,000. So if you look at a $400,000 house with a 6% interest rate, you're right, a 50-year mortgage saves you about $200 a month relative to a 30-year mortgage. But over the course of your 50 years of repaying, you're going to pay $320,000 more. Okay, so you're trading a small improvement in short-term affordability for a very long-term cost. And to me, the real question that this raises is, why are they floating all of these gimmicks on housing instead of trying to do something on housing affordability that we know will work? Where's the Republican investment in housing supply so that we can build more affordable housing in this country? Where's some of the zoning reform and regulatory relief? They control the Congress and the presidency, and they're not actually pursuing any of these housing affordability ideas that have been proven to work.
Well, the administration says their deregulation push is coming. So is it just not coming soon enough?
I mean, look, I think it's a drop in the bucket compared to some of the broader structural problems that we have in this country. We have a gap of several million homes relative to demand. And what we tried to do in the Biden administration was pass a law that would have built 3 million new affordable housing units across the country. Unfortunately, that was blocked in the Senate. Again, they control the Congress. They may be able to run up that hill and do better than we did. I hope that they do, honestly, because I think it's an important thing. But again, you're not seeing that kind of effort. And instead, you're seeing things like the 50-year mortgage. And by the way, I would add, their tariff policy is massively raising the cost of constructing new homes in the United States. And their immigration policy is also reducing the supply of labor and raising costs as well.
Wow. Didn't even get a chance to ask you about the $1 trillion coin. We'll have to do this for old time's sake. Bharat Ramamurti, former deputy director of the National Economic Council in the Biden administration. Thank you, Bharat, for the insights. Coming up, now that the temporary funding measure has passed the Senate, it's headed to the Republican-controlled House for approval. We'll talk about it with Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg.
Today, we know without any doubt in our hearts that after 2.5 centuries, America stands tall because America's veterans stood so strong. And soon our country will be stronger than ever before.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio alongside Joe Matthew. I'm Tyler Kendall. And that was President Trump today marking Veterans Day alongside Vice President J.D. Vance and service members. The president's remarks coming as the government remains shut down for a 42nd day, but the end could be near as the House prepares for a vote as soon as tomorrow. Joining us now to discuss here in our Washington bureau is Bloomberg's Wendy Benjaminson. And Wendy, I wanted to talk about one of the pressure points of this shutdown, which is, of course, the ongoing delays when it comes to air travel. And we had a really interesting article today on the Bloomberg News terminal that's reporting that before the mandated flight cuts went into effect, some airline executives privately pressed for more information about the safety data around making these cuts. What do we know about these conversations between the private sector and the Trump administration?
Right. Well, this was terrific reporting by our colleagues because a lot of the airline executives and their communications people really don't want. They're very nervous these days, as all CEOs probably are, about irritating the White House and finding out some blowback that they couldn't even imagine coming at them. So it was very difficult for them to do this reporting. But the executives they did talk to said that they simply wanted to know what the basis was for canceling this many flights. They wanted the data and they were basically told that this is a decision that the FAA is making, that it is non-negotiable, and trust us. And, you know, the trouble is that the consumer doesn't call the FAA. The consumer calls Delta or Alaska Air or whoever it is that is flying them. And they, you know, were apparently quite frustrated that there was nothing to say. And on the Sunday talk show, Sean Duffy, the transportation secretary, was on and was asked, is this a political decision? Are you trying, because that's what the suspicion is, right? That they're trying to make it so painful that the Democrats would cave and agree to reopen the government, which is ultimately what happened. So, and asked that on one of the Sunday shows, Sean Duffy said, no, it was the safety guys came to me, it wasn't me. And yet asked for the data that the safety guys gave to Sean Duffy, the airlines were told you can't see it.
Wow. Well, speaking of pain points, food stamps, SNAP benefits would be another where we've seen a real interruption in people's lives. Noteworthy, even after the gears started to turn on this compromise bill that's now passed the Senate, set to pass the House, the administration just yesterday went to the Supreme Court to ask for the court to block a lower court from forcing it to pay food stamps in full. Mm-hmm. What kind of political move is this? How do you make the argument for it? Or is this essentially about the authority of the executive, or is there more to it?
Well, obviously, that's the legal argument, the authority of the executive. However, appropriations begin, it's in the Constitution, begins with the House of Representatives.
Yes.
And it is up to them. But the House has largely ceded a lot of their duties to the White House and this administration, and they're allowing it to go. But in terms of the political thinking here, it sort of boggles my mind at what good politics is making your base go hungry? How does that work? The only thing that it would be, again, is the same thing with the airlines, is make it so politically difficult for everyone else that, that they cave and vote the way you want them to. Because there were no real negotiations through this whole thing. It was the Republicans saying this is the way we want it, the Democrats saying this is the way we want it, and there wasn't that sort of push and pull about a year here or a few months here or a few $100 million there. Yeah. It was just they each have their positions and that was it. Mm-hmm. So I think, they wanted to make the pain greater. But again, making people go hungry is an odd way to do it.
Might hear about that in the midterms.
I think we
Bloomberg's
will.
Wendy Benjaminson, thank you, as always, for being with us. As we add the voice of Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts, we should note he is a combat Marine Corps veteran, served in Afghanistan and in Panama, and is also a member of the House Commerce Committee. Thanks for being with us on this Veterans Day, Congressman, and as always, thank you for your service. I'm wondering your thoughts right now on whether you're disappointed on what you saw a few Senate Democrats do to push this over the line, and if that's the case, if you're a no vote in the House.
Joe, good to be back on. I'm a no vote. I'm a no vote because this deal doesn't get anything for the middle class. Wendy had used the term push and pull of negotiation. That's exactly right. That's what I tried to open up 7 weeks ago before this shutdown with an opening letter to House leadership signed by several other Democrats that said, hey, it doesn't have to be all one way or all the other way. Here's a series of ways we could get to yes. A vote on the tariffs, reversing some of the worst elements of the Medicaid cuts that are going to raise the cost of at-home care and health insurance premiums. Funding the COPS grants that improve public safety, for small towns throughout the country. Work with us, and let's get to yes for the middle class, because goodness knows the middle class has had a bad 2025. And Speaker Johnson responded by furloughing the House for 7 weeks.
So let's talk about policy, Congressman. Is there any hope for a deal when it comes to extending the Affordable Care Act premium subsidies, or is that just off the table for now? I'm wondering if you're clamoring for a vote after the government reopens on an extension. Can you give us any insight into what could be promised that could get you on board with this government reopening plan?
I'm not satisfied with a symbolic vote. I want a deal, and I'm willing to negotiate towards that deal. So if the Republicans want to make it 1 year and they want to shave off the enhanced subsidies for the highest earners, fine. But in exchange for that, we need an actual effort to help improve the ACA so that we're not right here again 1 year from now, because the healthcare sector is suffering from cost disease. Health insurance premiums are going up twice as fast as wages are. And I think elected officials and certainly the electorate is tired of playing this game of chasing the health insurance corporations around to try to get lower premiums. So let's do something bold and heterodox together. Let's take some good ideas from across the aisle. So, we can expand direct primary care. We should expand community health clinics. We should use Medicaid to provide for long-term care. We should use ICRAs, or individual contributor accounts, to help support the ACA. I'm open to all the ideas, but we got to get to work. And Speaker Johnson has been clear that he has, frankly, no interest and no ideas in health care.
Talked to Byron Donalds earlier today, Congressman, the Republican from Florida, who seemed to suggest that this whole debate is misguided or somehow a waste of time. I want you to listen to what he said about this debate over Obamacare subsidies. Here's Byron Donalds.
The Democrats were arguing for like 5 different things over the last 40 days, and that's how you know that their negotiations weren't serious. What the Democrats have been telling the American people consistently is that they need more subsidies to cover up the true cost of health care. And these subsidies are on top of the existing structure of subsidies built into the law of the Affordable Care Act. So in short, more subsidies is not going to fix Obamacare. What it's going to do is mask the true cost and the true damage to families everywhere.
There's been a striking change in talking points and rhetoric around this, Congressman. The president says he just wants to send money to people and they can be entrepreneurial and negotiate coverage for themselves with health insurers. Erin Houchin, Republican from Indiana, was with us before you joined, talking about how Obamacare is broken and must be replaced by something. So we're going to have this debate all over again, it seems. Will that prevent a vote on subsidies in your chamber? And what do you think about this change in language?
My challenge to Mr. Donalds is go to your constituents in Florida. And by the way, Florida is the state that probably first amongst all 50 states in the union will be most affected by this expiration of the ACA subsidies. Go to your constituents and tell them your plan. Tell them your plan, because it's been 15 years since Obamacare passed. Republicans have been complaining for 15 years, and they have never offered a better or even just a different idea for health care. I am ready, willing, and eager to work across the aisle on health care. I'm in the minority, Joe. I got no other choice. And it's crickets on the other side. Like I said, direct primary care arrangements, great, let's look at it. Community health center expansion funded through taking care of the upcoding in Medicare Advantage. All right, let's look at that. Long-term care insurance, okay, let's work on this non-ideologically. Their only plan that I've seen was to slash Medicaid this summer in a manner that guarantees that 10 million individuals will end up in the emergency room rather than at primary or preventative care clinics, thereby raising insurance premiums for all of us. And then when they were asked about it, they blamed immigrants. That's the Republican health care proposal.
So, Congressman, you're talking about what a potential deal could look like, but of course, Democrats weren't able to get there this time around. I'm wondering what you make of Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer's leadership during this government shutdown. You have some colleagues that are calling for him to step aside as leader. Do you think that he should be replaced?
Senators can elect their own leader. What I would say is you've seen the difference in approach that I took versus that Senator Schumer took. Senator Schumer took an all-or-nothing approach of indefinitely expand extend the ACA subsidies. I took the approach of laying out a number of different ways to get to yes, all of which I know would have supermajority support from Americans and would directly benefit the middle class. I think that's a better approach to take because this administration's economic policy has been some combination of conspiracy theorizing, like with RFK and Tylenol, some combination of cronyism, and some combination of just downright incompetence. And the middle class is the worst for it. Democrats do need to use this moment of leverage to get a win for the middle class. I've always agreed with that. But we've got to be flexible and get that push and pull of negotiation to actually secure the win.
If there's no deal on Obamacare subsidies, Congressman, do we shut down again at the end of January?
Well, that is the question to be asking, Joe. That's exactly the right question to ask. And that is what I am going to be pressing on when I return to Washington tomorrow is I don't want to do this rodeo again. I don't think my constituents want to do it again. It's pretty exhausting and no way to run a great country. So let's have a strategy right now that we can lean into and then deliver on going into January.
Congressman, in just the last 30 seconds that we have you, how are you planning to get back to Washington? I'm wondering what you've made about the delays in our air traffic control system, and if we've learned from this shutdown that maybe there should be protection for these workers come next time.
Unacceptable to put the flying public at risk, for political ends, which I do think is what happened at the Department of Transportation. I saw your earlier reporting there. I'll be flying, and we need to get more air traffic controllers hired, not just because of the shutdown hangover, but just in general, since the pandemic, there has been a dearth of air traffic controllers that's putting a lot of strain on them, and it is undermining airside operations at too many airports in this country.
All right, Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts, thank you so much for joining us, especially here on this Veterans Day. And coming up, a Utah judge ruled the Republican-controlled state legislature must adopt a redrawn congressional map proposed by a coalition of voting rights groups. We'll bring you the latest on this latest redistricting measure. And tomorrow, the House is set to vote on the Senate's stopgap bill. We'll discuss with our political panel. That's up ahead on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. This is Balance Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio alongside Joe Matthew. I'm Tyler Kendall. We'll have more on tomorrow's expected House vote to reopen the government when we convene our political panel in a few moments. But first, here are the stories we're watching in today's Power Brief. Director of the White House National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, says sufficient economic data could be one casualty of the government shutdown, suggesting that some of the economic data that was supposed to be collected in October may never be recorded, making it difficult to get a comprehensive look at the health of the U.S. economy. Hassett told CNBC, quote, "I've been told that some of the surveys were never completed. We're going to be staring a little bit in cloudy weather for a while until we get the data agencies back up."
The U.S. military exploring the possibility of building a temporary base near the Gaza Strip to monitor a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The Navy seeking a cost estimate on a temporary self-sustaining military base capable of housing 10,000 personnel near Gaza, according to requests seen by Bloomberg reporters. Press Secretary at the White House, Caroline Leavitt, saying the administration has not approved such an action and that the request is, quote, a single piece of paper produced by random people within the military, unquote.
And a judge in Utah has rejected a Republican-drawn redistricting map in a blow to conservatives. The judge overseeing the case is instead demanding the state adopt a map drawn by a centrist coalition of voting rights groups that filed a lawsuit challenging the proposal. It's a victory for Democrats as several states nationwide look to redraw congressional maps ahead of the midterm elections.
Joining us now on the eve of what could be a vote to reopen the government, this evening's political panel. Megan Hayes, former special assistant to President Biden, our Democratic strategist, alongside Republican strategist Lisa Cabuso-Miller, senior VP at Rock Solutions. Great to have both of you with us here. Is this actually how this ends, Lisa? You spent enough time working for a former Speaker of the House to get a sense of this. Mike Johnson says he has the votes. Others suggest he's got some whipping to do tonight. How about you?
I would suspect that he probably has the votes, but you know what it looks like when they come back to town. There's always a squeaky wheel, and I suspect there's probably quite a few of them. So folks are going to have a lot to say when they arrive back.
Yep.
And so I would not expect smooth sailing, but I would expect that he will have the votes ultimately, and this will get done.
So, Megan, let's talk about next steps. Is House Speaker Mike Johnson going to promise a vote that mirrors the Senate one when it comes to extending those Affordable Care Act premium subsidies? Could we see a discharge petition trying to force this issue? Or is this something that Democrats are going to have to unite behind and push forward ahead of the end of the year when those subsidies expire?
So there have been several Republicans, even today. Mike Lauer said that he would agree to a one-year subsidy extension on the subsidy. So I do think that he's going to have some trouble in getting this done if there isn't some sort of agreement to at least have a vote. I think that his members see how politically challenging it will be for them if they do vote against health care, and I don't think he wants to put a lot of his members in that spot.
Do Republicans want this or not? We started with the Tony Fabrizio polling that showed Republicans need to get this done to have a fighting chance in the midterm elections. But the rhetoric that we've heard, starting with Donald Trump, send the money directly to people, has kind of created a new conversation about a new alternative to Obamacare. Do Republicans want to go there now? That's an eye roll.
I struggle with the idea that we all of a sudden are going to that a truth social offering will turn into policy.
Yeah.
Do I think that maybe that's the opening salvo to a conversation? Perhaps. But I think that is so unbelievably politically impossible to consider between now and January, February, whenever it is that they're talking about the possibility of even considering that. So I don't know, Joe. I have a very, very hard time thinking. How long did it just take to get the government to reopen? I mean, to do healthcare policy, comprehensive healthcare policy, politically impossible.
Well, we've heard a few different proposals, perhaps, from members of both sides of the aisle on this program. One that we're watching closely is from Senator Cassidy. He's going to lead these healthcare negotiations, a totally new plan altogether. Instead of these enhanced subsidies, it would be a federally funded flexible spending account for ACA enrollees. Megan, how does this end? Are we looking at something totally new here by the end of it?
Not by the end of December when they're going to take a vote on this. Democrats and Republicans each have had 10 plus years to come up with a solution that they haven't come up with. So they're not going to take the risk of having all of these people lose their health care in January. They would not be able to afford it. So whether there's a long-term conversation that happens in the next year, absolutely possible. But I do not think that we are going to have a new plan by the end of December when they vote.
Well, before this CR runs out, there's going to be a new mayor of New York. Zohran Mamdani will be sworn into office on the 1st of January. I believe it's in Times Square. Should be quite the visual. And there's new reporting by Bloomberg that aides to President Trump are now reviewing federal funds that benefit New York City to potentially suspend or cancel them after he won the mayor's race. The president promised to do this, or at least threatened to do it. Do you take him at his word?
For sure. I absolutely expect that there will be a possibility. Look, I think New York City is going to figure out how to navigate this, but it's going to be no surprise to anyone if the president decides that he's going to take political action against the new mayor.
I believe it was $7.4 billion in New York City's fiscal year 2026 budget is tied to federal funding. So, Megan, what sort of impact could this make, not just for the funding that we're already expecting to be allocated, but talking about working with this administration down the line, because we have years of this?
I just think that Mamdani hasn't done anything yet. He has a campaign promise, sort of very similar to Trump, has made a lot of promises that he hasn't kept. So I just think the federal government is not going to do anything until Mamdani does something that they don't like. And Mamdani has a lot to do before he even gets to enacting some of his policies. He needs to learn how to get the snow removed and the trash picked up. So I think that it's like a joke. It's laughable. I think it's just Donald Trump trying to play politics here. But yes, we should take him seriously, but I'm just not sure how far that's going to go.
You're a Republican from New Jersey. What do Republicans who need to travel the tunnel every day think about infrastructure funding being pulled?
I think they'd be super unhappy about it. And I think that as soon as it affects traffic and people have that to talk about, boy, I'll tell you what, Trump is going to hear about it, and so is every other elected official in the Northeast.
But I think that him canceling the bridge project right before the election in New Jersey impacted people in Bergen County who didn't vote then for the Republicans. So it's his threats are already impacting his base and his Republican voters.
Well, let's keep on perhaps elections, and I wanted to get your thoughts, particularly when it comes to the redistricting plan in Utah. The upshot here is that Democrats need to net 3 seats next year in order to flip the chamber. This is just one in a series of redistricting fights we're seeing, but does it help Democrats get closer to that goal?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also a story today that the folks in Texas are really concerned now about their redistricting plans because they saw some of the base that they thought was going with Donald Trump and swing to Donald Trump, especially Latino voters, might not necessarily be as strong with Trump, so their voting map might not actually be as impactful or effective as they thought it was. So Republicans started a mess here, and they might actually see an unfortunate circumstance from the plays that they put out.
We're just looking at a map of the country here with red and blue states trying to, I guess, match each other here. Can Democrats match Republicans? There might be a couple more states to go. We're still looking at the possibility of Virginia and some others.
I have lived through redistricting. I'm sure Megan has too. This is not a 24-hour turnaround. This is a big project. It is a mess. It does not come together well. I mean, anybody who tells you otherwise has not sat in the room while everybody fights over what seats get, what districts get what. And ultimately, I think Megan's absolutely right. Tuesday was a bit of an eye-opener for Republicans. And to redistrict now and to play that game now, I don't necessarily think gets them to where they think they're going to get when Election Day hits.
Well, talking about the makeup of the House, we did get breaking news in the last hour that Representative-elect Grijalva is going to be sworn in at this point, really over months of delays to her confirmation. How critical is her vote going to be for Democrats as they try to push their own priorities through?
I think it's extremely important, but it's more important that the people of Arizona now have representation that they didn't have for 7 weeks. I think that we all know why they weren't doing it. It's because of the Epstein files. But I think that is going to be the next story that we are going to cover endlessly, is because it's just going to keep trickling out. And there's just so much there. And it's one thing that the American people are aligned on, is everyone thinks there's something in the Epstein files.
Thought you might mention that. So interesting that, this would bring the discharge petition to the floor, but that's going nowhere in the Senate, right? Does this actually result in the Epstein files being released?
It sure does feel like there's going to be some shaking and movement underground, under the ground, underneath the files. Look, I think that ultimately when we see the files, I think a lot of things are going to be redacted. I think there's a lot that's going to go on with this. I'm not sure where the Senate is. I think they're just happy that they passed a bill last night, Joe. So I think that if nothing else, I think that they know that that's probably the next fight they're going to have.
Wow. We're hearing a lot from Speaker Johnson said the Epstein files have already been released by way of the Oversight Committee. Is there that much more there?
Who knows? But I think that the problem is nobody knows and no one can believe anyone because no one's telling the truth here. So this is going to continue just to trickle out. Then there's going to be more press stories. This could go on for months. And the Republicans do not want this to go on for months.
Oh, boy.
The president doesn't want this to go on for months.
It is corrosive.
Yeah.
Absolutely the case.
You ready to cover this for another 2 months?
Gosh, there's so much to cover for the next.
There's a question about whether we're going to cover another shutdown. Both of you, do we shut down in January, even if we reopen tomorrow?
I feel like I'm happy that we are getting through the first one, but I do think that it is likely that we are going to go back. Nothing has been resolved. No one feels like they won. No one feels like the shutdown was worth the time that was lost. And I think a lot of people are really going to be hurting, and they're going to be angry by the time we get to January.
I agree.
All right, we'll leave it there. Tonight's political panel, Megan Hayes and Lisa Kruser-Miller, thank you so much, as always. And for more on all the stories you heard here tonight, make sure to check out the Washington Edition newsletter on the terminal and online.
It's going to be a big day tomorrow, so share it with us here on Balance of Power. Alongside Tyler Kendall, I'm Joe Matthew. We're set to vote in Washington right here on Bloomberg.